Godfather of Anxiety here. For my latest video, I wanted to discuss how we can deal when we're recovering from anxiety spectrum conditions, how we can deal with our bad days, how we can get through them. So before I get into this, the first thing I want to tell all of you guys out there who are enduring these anxiety spectrum conditions, you probably already know this, but you're going to have bad days. Even as you're recovering and after you feel you're pretty much fully recovered, you're going to have bad days. And how you react to these will have a large, will play a large part in the outcome overall of whether it's a bad day or it turns into something more. And this is something that I've had to learn, sometimes the hard way, over the last 21 years. But I feel like it was reason enough to make the video so that you guys don't fall into some of the same traps that I have over the years. where a bad day becomes a bad week or even worse. So, as far as what constitutes a bad day, what I'll do is I'll break it down for each of the anxiety spectrum conditions that I personally have endured over the last 21 years. As far as generalized anxiety, a bad day is a day when you wake up with that feeling in the pit of your stomach where things don't feel quite right. Maybe things also don't look quite right. You have a harder time focusing. You have that feeling in the pit of your stomach and you have racing thoughts maybe again, and you just don't feel, you can't relax, and you guys have to know what I'm talking about. It's like you can't exhale. And that's something that will be a bad day for somebody who has generalized anxiety disorder. And I've had this happen. And it can happen completely out of the blue. You wake up, or maybe it develops as the day goes on. And it starts to feel like, oh boy, this reminds me of when I was, not doing well. Anyways, that's what would happen with generalized anxiety. And it unfortunately happened to me many times. Then, like with panic disorder. With panic disorder, you either feel like you're going to have a panic attack or you may actually have a panic attack. And again, it seems completely out of the blue. Things have been going along well. Maybe you've done some, you've accomplished some really good things recently, but then out of the blue, you end up having a panic attack. Or maybe you just feel like you're going to. You're right on the edge of it. You can tell that, you're bordering, you're tinkering on actually having a panic attack. Intrusive thought OCD. A bad day with intrusive thought OCD, you're something just triggers a thought. And maybe it just, whatever triggers it, it starts to play on a loop. I know for me personally, driving. Sometimes, especially when I'm with my family, on a bad day, I might start having the intrusive thought of, oh, what if I swerved into traffic? And it starts to play on a loop. It's no fun, and this can be when things have been going along well for you. And then as far as a bad day with depression, you wake up and maybe things don't look quite right. Then maybe you have something planned that you enjoy, and then as you're doing it or after you do it, you didn't get the joy from it that you normally get. It was, it just, you didn't seem like you got the amount of enjoyment that you normally would. And to somebody who is neurotypical, they'll just pass this off as, a bad day. But if you have been clinically depressed in the past, then that can creep in. Those negative thoughts can creep into your mind, and you're like, no, I'm not going down that rabbit hole again, am I? I'm not. I can't deal with that again. So that's just what bad days have been for me personally over the last 21 years when I've had bad days with these different anxiety spectrum conditions that I've experienced. How do you deal with them? That's a big question. How do you deal with them? Okay, so this is starting to go downhill again. How do I deal with a bad day? Number one, don't overreact to it. Don't catastrophize it and think, uh-oh, this is happening again to me. The absolute opposite of that. Allow yourself to understand that and compartmentalize it as a bad day. It's really important that you do this because, and I'll get into it a little more later on in the video, but there's probably a reason that you're having the bad day. You might not think there is. You're like, well, I'm just doing what I've been doing. But if you pay close attention, you'll probably notice that there's something that is contributing to why you're having a bad day. Okay, you have a day, you wake up, things don't feel right. Maybe you're having racing thoughts. You're struggling. Stick with your routines, though. You know, don't start to avoid things. Finish your day. It might not be comfortable, it might be unpleasant, but finish your day. And the whole time, tell yourself, this is a bad day. This is not a relapse, this is a bad day. And then when, and you can do this even on the bad day, but start analyzing things that may have contributed to you having a bad day. For me, one of the biggest contributors to bad days I find is when I don't get sleep. And it can be cumulative. Maybe you have one of those days where you get 5 or 6 hours. And then right after that, you get 4 or 5 hours. And then maybe you have kind of a catch-up day, but something wakes you up in the middle of the night. You don't really sleep. And then you look, and now you have a whole week of sleep that's very compromised. Well, I know when I do this, I'm laying the groundwork to have a bad day. And this has happened to me many times, over the last 21 years, where I didn't get enough sleep and it started to affect me. The OCD, the intrusive thoughts start to come back a little bit. I don't process stress as well. I might have issues driving. These things all pop back if I notice if I don't get a good night's rest continuously. A day or two usually doesn't set me back. But if I have a whole week or more than that where my sleep is compromised, I will start to regress and start to experience some of the mental health issues I have over the last 21 years. And another thing that, as far as getting through this, it's okay to take a day off. If things are really feel like they're starting to get overwhelming, just take a day off. Take a day off, but on that day off, this is what you want to do. You want to sleep. You want to make sure you get your sleep. Exercise would be good too early on in that day, but get your sleep. Make sure and try to shut out all the outside stress. Just give yourself one day, though, to do this. And also, reassure yourself that this is one day. One of the keys to me getting better when I've been at my worst has been compartmentalizing the idea that this is not a relapse, this is just a bad day. I've had these come on seemingly out of the blue. I've been you know, maybe the end of my work week. And, you know, normally you get excited. You're at the end of the work week. You have the weekend to, you know, maybe enjoy time with your family or whatever. And you should normally, you know, when I'm doing well, you know, the last day of the week is a great day. You know, you're like, okay, get this over with. But when I've had bad days, that it hasn't felt like that. And, you know, it can start to make you think, uh-oh. But I've learned it's a bad day. It's one day. If it's panic disorder, it's one panic attack. If it's anxiety, it's one bad day where your thoughts are racing and you have that feeling in the pit of your stomach. Let it be one bad day. Make sure, another thing you want to make sure of is that you're taking your meds the way you should. If you're on medication, also make sure you haven't started to relapse into avoidance behaviors, because you know that avoidance behaviors, as soon as you start doing them, your world will get smaller again, and you will start to feel anxiety when you do things that are even mildly stressful. And that's why you have to keep stretching out. I wish there was an easier way to do this where you could just, you know, hibernate for a month and then come out and, you know, fly all over the world. But that's not the way it's been for me. I need to stay in a routine where I'm not avoiding things. I'm not, you know, confined, that I'm still stretching out socially, that I'm stretching out traveling, driving, just not letting the bad habits creep back in where you start to avoid things. And so this is pretty much what I wanted to say. Just don't let things snowball, or don't catastrophize. I know that's so tempting when you've been in a really dark place. When you've been in a really dark place, it's like, oh my goodness, this is happening again. And we have trained our brains, unfortunately, subconsciously, to catastrophize and think the worst all the time. Sometimes it's almost like a way to get control or a defense mechanism. But it will not be healthy to do that if you've done something where you're starting to feel those feelings again. And it will happen. I'm telling you guys, don't freak out over it. You'll have a day where either the anxiety, the depression, the OCD, where it comes back. And you can't react to it. You have to just let it happen. And then at the same time you're letting it happen, you have to remind yourself it's one day. It's just one day. And get sleep. You'll be shocked at how, if you really do that, how it will just end up being one bad day. You go right back to getting your sleep, to getting your routine, you know, keeping your routines. And you'll have less and less of those if you don't let them turn into something more than just a bad day. It's so important how we react and how we don't overreact to these bad days. And I think that's something that I don't hear talked about a lot when I hear discussions on anxiety. And I think it's really important because I know people who have anxiety, and sometimes I'll see something start to send them in a spiral. And, you know, I know that if you just, you know, figure out a way to compartmentalize it, that you can have it just be a bad day or maybe a bad week, but certainly not a full-blown relapse where, you know, your life is becoming, you know, really confined and unfulfilling. So that's about all I want to say in this video. I didn't want to make a long one here. Just again, thank you guys so much for tuning into the channel. Make sure that if you know somebody who has these anxiety spectrum conditions, or if you personally are doing it, go ahead and go through. Now I have quite a catalog of videos that touch on a number of subjects that I've battled personally over the last 21 years. Definitely, there might be some meat on the bones that could help you guys at least understand what's going on with you and maybe lead you in the right direction towards recovery. So thank you so much, and until my next video, take care.